All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here for our Duesenberg program. Hopefully you got a chance to go out and look at the Duesenbergs there in the gallery. My name is Bruce Patton. I'm the curator here at Savoy, and really appreciate you spending your evening with us. I'd like to mention our current exhibits we have, obviously the Duesenberg one, and hopefully you got to see the roar of the Jaguar out there with our racing Jaguars. Got some great cars out there. Our small block muscle, we just put in the Cannonball Run cars, so take a look at those. And then also our Savoy collection cars. So what I'd like to mention is the next ones that we have are the Shelby built. So those cars are all in now, so those will go in November. And then in December, we have Ferrari in America. So that'll be another great exhibit going into Gallery A. And we have a couple movies left for the end of the year, the Gumball Rally. So that's a great movie. So that'll be Friday, November 14th. And then we'll finish it off with A Christmas Story. So please come and see those two movies. I'd like to thank Styles Auto Care, again, for their support for us to be able to do these Tireside chats that we have. So thank you very much. Before I go further, I would like to recognize a couple people that are here. I'd like to recognize Dwight Schallbach, who brought us one of the Duesenbergs out here. So thank you for coming. And I'd like to recognize Chip Kofer, who brought us this car here that we have on stage. And unfortunately, a friend there of a lot of people here. Judge John North, he had loaned us two cars here, and I'd like to let you know that unfortunately he passed away just recently, but we'd like to thank him very much for loaning us a couple of cars. So thank you very much. Okay, now I'd like to bring out Bill Rothermel. I don't know if you guys know Bill, but we met Bill at some of the different concourse events, and he's a great MC. I think he's done, over, 190 shows. He's also a lifelong automobile historian. He's part of the board for the AACA, and he's just an all-around great guy. So Bill's going to start us off by going through a little history of the Duesenberg, and then we're going to bring out Ken, and then they're going to do a little co-moderating, talking about different Duesenberg cars. At the end, what I'd like is we'll do a question and answer. If you would wait for us to bring the microphone to you, because we are recording this, and we won't be able to hear it on the recording if you don't wait for the microphone. So I'd like to go ahead and bring Bill Rothermel to the front. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there one up here? Okay. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming out. When Bruce asked me to do this, I said, you got to kind of assume not everybody is a Duesenberg expert. So this is kind of Duesenberg 101. If you want to call it that. I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story about the brothers, the company, and just give you a little background before Ken and I sit down and actually chat about cars. During the period of time where we'll be chatting about cars, I have put together, 160 pictures, maybe something like that, over the years that I have taken of various Duesenbergs at various places. So that's just kind of run during that part of the discussion. So you'll always have a beautiful Duesenberg to look at. This evening, of course, it's called It's a Doozy. According to the noted automotive historian and my dear friend, the late Beverly Ray Kimes, the phrase, it's a doozy, was born principally for convenience, something to say about something so grand that other words fail. The car it was named for remains a larger-than-life metaphor for the unrelenting superlative and a legend that transcends time, said Kimes, as only she could so eloquently do. You flip up, thank you. There we go. And we'll go to the next slide, please. The incredible Duesenberg came about because Eric Laban Cord bought Fred Duesenberg's struggling Indianapolis, Indiana company and told the race car engineer to build him the best car, cost be damned. And he did. Arguably, it remains to this day America's most formidable motor car. Everything about the car was otherworldly when it was introduced in 1929, as you can see on this photo. Under hood sat a massive 420 cubic inch inline 8-cylinder engine, fully 4 feet long from fan to flywheel, finished in a bright Kermit green with fittings in nickel, chrome and stainless flanked by giant manifolds. 2 chain-driven overhead camshafts operated 32 valves, offering a then unthinkable 265 horsepower. Underneath sat a giant ladder frame with side channels 8.5 inches deep, a drop-forged I-beam front axle, and semi-floating rear axle suspended by 2.5-inch wide semi-elliptic springs, 41 inches front and 62 inches rear. 15-inch diameter hydraulic brakes, 3 inches wide, provided stopping force. The huge 3-speed transmission featured bearings with either roller or ball races while transmitting all that horsepower through an 11-inch twin plate clutch. I was flip back to the slide, sorry. We're ahead one, sorry. Costs new in the instrument panel afforded a 150 mile per hour speedometer, a 5,000 RPM tach, an 8-day clock with split second hand for timed readings, and warning lights advising the driver when to change engine oil, check the battery, water level, and if the automatic chassis lubrication pump was working. Costs new in 1929, $7,500 at introduction for the chassis. Shortly thereafter increased to $8,500. That what you're looking at on the photograph behind me was $8,500. Some 480 were produced, all with custom coachwork of the buyer's choice, ranging from sport roadster to formal limousine. Captains of industry and the Hollywood elite were typically among the buyers. Advertising, ironically, was understated. Simply, he or she drives a Duesenberg. The company delivered what others only promised, unmatched status. To keep things in perspective, a Ford Model A in 1929 cost as little as $450. Powered by a simple inline 4-cylinder engine, 40 horsepower was on tap, and stopping, if you called it that, was provided by 4-wheel mechanical brakes. Ford sold a whopping 1,310,147 in calendar year 1929. Top speed, about 50 mile per hour. The Duesenberg, admittedly, wasn't supposed to be a car for every man or woman. Enough, however, did not remain enough. Less than 4 years later, the SJ arrived, offering 320 horsepower from the now supercharged engine. Said the company, in answer to the demand from numerous sportsmen and owners of fine cars for a fast, strictly sport automobile. We don't really think of a car that weighs 7,000 pounds as a sports car, but Duesenberg Advertising did. It was really Fred Duesenberg's triumph of engineering. Sadly, he was killed in an automobile accident shortly after conceiving the supercharger that transformed the J into the SJ. Imagine 93 years ago, a 2.25-ton chassis being propelled to 129 mile per hour in tests at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. This was accomplished in high gear, and Duesenberg advertised this. 104 mile per hour reached in second, and 0 to 100 in a remarkable 20 seconds. This is 1932 or 33 roughly. The SJ chassis alone cost $9,500, and most approached $20,000 with completed custom coachwork. A mere 3 dozen or so were built, just too much for post-Depression America, considering that the year was 1932, and one realizes that the performance of this measure was nothing short of astounding. Astounding as the J might be, Augie Duesenberg, who had taken over as the company's chief engineer following his brother's death, developed the hardware to boost the SJ's output to as much as 400 horsepower. An essentially stock Duesenberg SJ chassis fitted with special bodywork and dubbed the Duesenberg Special, aka the Mormon Meteor, was taken to the salt flats of Bonneville, Utah in October 1935. Driver Ab Jenkins attained an unthinkable 152.145 mile per hour for 60 minutes while averaging 135.47 mile per hour for 24 hours. The 24-hour record stood until 1961. The Walter Murphy Company of Pasadena, California, built more bodies on the Duesenberg chassis than any other coach builder, a total of 144, including 60 convertible coupes built between December 1928 and spring of 1932, the most popular Duesenberg model. Incidentally, most of Murphy's bodies were penned by Franklin Q. Hershey, and the list of clients, we flip back one please, the list of clients included Mary Pickford, Douglas Fairbanks, Tom Mix, Bronco Billy, Clark Gable, Gary Cooper, Clara Bow, Gloria Swanson, novelist Zane Grey, publishing magnate William Randolph Hearst, and Howard Hughes and film producer Hal Roach, to name a few. It definitely was the car of the Hollywood elite. The Duesenberg, Duesenberg owner, who had the most cars, was bon vivant George Whittle Jr., who commissioned 6 Duesenbergs during his life, reputedly 5 for his personal use and 1 given to a mistress. Whittle was the scion of an immense Gilded Age fortune amassed by his grandfathers through banking, transportation, real estate, and utility ownership in San Francisco. With all the hoopla surrounding the Model Js and SJ Duesenbergs, we flip ahead again one more, thank you. With all the hoopla surrounding the Model J and SJ Duesenbergs, one tends to forget that the Model A, the company's first production automobile, was one of the most significant new cars ever produced in the United States. Its inline 8-cylinder engine and 4-wheel hydraulic brakes were first for an American car when introduced at New York's Commodore Hotel in October 1920. This 1921 Duesenberg that you see on the screen behind me was commissioned by Samuel Northrop Castle from Hawaii and was the first Model A sold to the public by the Duesenberg Automobile Company. His family was the Dole pineapple fortune. It remained with the Castle family from new until it was donated to the Auburn Court Duesenberg Museum in 2019. Its unique coupe body style by the Bender Body Company of Cleveland, Ohio, features doors placed between the windows and the cowl, along with a lowered belt line and roof stance. 2 spare tires were placed at the rear, along with a railed area below the deck, augmenting the cargo space in the compartment below. You'll also notice, too, how tall the car is. Mr. Castle was, I believe, 6'5", so he wanted a car that he was able to get in and out of easily, thus that kind of tall look. Lest we forget, Augie and Fred Duesenberg were German immigrant family bicycle manufacturers from Iowa who quickly developed a reputation of building some of the finest and most successful race cars in the mid-teens into the early 1920s. Their company was founded in 1913 in St. Paul, Minnesota, moving to Elizabeth, New Jersey in 1916 to manufacture engines for World War I. In 1919, when their government contracts were canceled, they moved to Indianapolis, Indiana. That year, 8-cylinder Duesenberg race cars established 66 AAA speed records on the 2-mile board track at Sheepshead Bay in Brooklyn. The Model A, initially called the Duesenberg 8, was referred to as the Grand Prix car, as Duesenbergs won the French Grand Prix in 1921. Its 88 horsepower, 260 CID overhead cam engine and the sporty chassis offered to the public differed little from racing versions. At $6,000, just 667 chassis were built, all with custom coachwork produced between 1921 and 1926, until E.L. Cord arrived on the scene, bought the company, and ordered the design of the new Model J. Suddenly, the world forgot what an extraordinary car the Model A was. Today, among top concours, a Duesenberg is often found in the winner's circle, receiving Best of Show honors at the Amelia and the Pebble Beach Concours d'Elegance, for example. Actor Gary Cooper's 1935 SSJ sold for a record price, $22 million, in 2018 at Gooding's Pebble Beach sale. With the stroke of the auctioneer's gavel, it became the highest price ever paid for an American car at auction by a considerable margin at that time. The sale bested that of the very first Shelby Cobra, another blue chip collectible, which sold for $13.75 million in 2016. The world's champion automobile, and built to outclass, outrun, and outlast any car on the road, were not idle boasts. Nearly 100 years later, the Duesenberg mystique remains. So you're now experts on Duesenberg. I'd like to bring to the stage my good friend Ken Gross. Ken is, as you all know, is a fixture here at the Savoy. Ken is a well-known author. How many books have you done? 25 books. I'm still working on the first one. I look at it every day and I think, I'm going to start on this again one of these days. You got to inspire me a little bit better next time. But Ken is well-known. He is the chief judge at Greenwich and also at, I'm forgetting. But he's probably belonged to the Classic Car Club as long as anybody on the planet.
62 years.
62 years.
I was a child when I started.
So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ken Gross.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Bill. You're taking the far corner, so I'll
And I
follow you.
apologize walking the way I'm walking. I have Achilles tendonitis. And if anybody's had it, you understand what it's like. So I'm a little slow moving here. So that may not be good. See if I can sit in this without bending my leg too far.
Got it? Great.
We're in. Okay. Well, Ken and I thought, as the Tireside chat is very simply listed, we're just going to chat about Duesenbergs and talk. Would you recall the first time that when you saw a Duesenberg?
I can't remember the first time I saw one, but I can tell you a quick story about the first time I drove one. There was a collector named Rick Carroll who lived in Florida, lovely guy. He owned 18 Duesenbergs, and I went down to write an article about him. We'd never met. We walked into his garage. He said, have you ever driven a Duesenberg? I said, no. He said, well, pick whatever car you want, and let's go for a ride. So I picked an unrestored Murphy Torpedo, which I just thought was great looking, and I went to get in the passenger side, and he said, no, you drive. And then I looked at him, and I said, you're not getting in. He said, no, go for a ride, and then we'll talk about them. So I got in the car. I'd never driven one before, but I kind of knew where everything was, and I drove out of his driveway. He lived in this palatial home down onto the road, and I thought, this must be what it's like in 1929 to have all the money in America and be in the best car you could possibly be. And engine was humming. I thought it was great. I looked in the rearview mirror, and I thought, I'm not really speeding yet, but I'm obviously being stopped. So I pulled over, and there was a lady, a policewoman, and she looked at me, she looked at my license, and she said, that there's one of Mr. Carroll's cars, isn't it? And I said, yes, ma'am, it is. And she said, what are you doing in it? And I said, I'm a writer. I've come down to write about this car and write about Duesenbergs and write about Rick. And she said, that's a likely story, and it's probably true, but let's go back to his garage, and we'll see. So we drove up the driveway, me and the Duesenberg, and
Her in the Dodge.
and she in this, exactly. And she jumped out of the car and saluted Rick, who said, good morning, Joyce. What seems to be the problem? And he said, she said, this young man, I was younger then, says he has permission to drive the car. And Rick said, he does. She said, that's all I needed to know. She got back in the cop car and went away, and I turned around and rinsed and repeated. So,
Great story.
I will say just really quickly that I was surprised at how powerful it was. I was surprised at how quickly you went from first to second, and it was just magnificent, and I still think they are.
Well, you brought up an interesting point when you said, I imagine what it was like in 1929 driving around in a car like this. Keep in mind, the car was introduced, and 8 months later, the market tanked. We had the crash of Wall Street, and they had just introduced the car of cars. And now, what do we do? Well, ultimately, it eliminated many, if not almost all, of the coach builders who built the bodies for the cars, but Duesenberg and Auburn and Cord, the triumvirate that were owned by Cord, but Stutz and Pierce Arrow and Packard lasted a bit longer. But all these cars were gone as a result of the demand for luxury cars dissipating, and people were almost embarrassed.
Yeah, to drive one, for sure.
Yeah.
Here's the thing I bet you don't know. The Dow Jones Index in September of 1929 hit its high point, $381. Today it's 46,000. And no one thought when the market tanked that it was going to last as long as it did.
Sure.
I mean, it took almost until World War II. So the luxury car makers knew that stopped a bullet, but they really didn't think it would be as bad or as long as it was.
I think we also now looking back, it's easy to look back and pass judgment on things. But I think we realize now why so many Duesenbergs survived. They were special cars.
Mm-hmm.
They survived the scrap drives of World War II because they were, I mean, it was a big deal to have one. There were only 480 chassis made. And we maybe should kind of touch on that a bit. When you bought this car, you bought a chassis. You didn't buy the body. So you got the guts, if you want to call it that, of this car, the wheels, the tires, the brakes, the running gear, transmission, engine, etc. But all that pretty was not part of the car. So you sat down with a designer. And in fact, Cadillac had in their New York office upstairs at Upper Q Cadillac, you went up the steps to Fleetwood, and you had just ordered a new V16 Cadillac, and you'd spec it out as you wanted. So a similar situation existed here. There was a lot of money to be had at that time to have a personalized automobile built like that.
Well,
and all A's and all J's, SJ's, every Duesenberg had a custom body.
Well, they called it the carriage trade, and one of the reasons was because in the era of the horse-drawn carriages, that's really what you did. You went to the carriage builder, and they showed you sketches, perhaps, or you showed them what you wanted, and it was built. And a quick note about the chassis Bill mentioned: each of them was taken to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway,
That's right.
and they were driven to make sure that the engine was right, the suspension, the brakes, and then and only then they went to the coach builder for bodywork.
And as Ken said, this is a vestige of the carriage building industry. The cars' bodies oftentimes were named after a type of carriage or a type of coachwork. A Brougham, a Victoria. I'm looking at this car here, at Mr. Kofer's car, and the convertible top is rolled back. Okay, that car would be a Victoria because the back seat is covered. You can't see out of the back seat. That's what they referred to as a Victoria. It was private for the rear seat passengers. But that position, that roof that's rolled back like that, you've all heard of a Cadillac Coupe de Ville. That's called the de Ville position. So when they rolled the roof back like that, that was a vestige of the carriage era. Cadillac just happened to, GM used it as a marketing idea. It had nothing to do with the fact that the roof in the car rolled back. But in this car, it did. And that was very fashionable, obviously. You were hiding perhaps who was in the back, but the person who was out behind the steering wheel was there for everybody to see.
And some of the coach builders came up with their own special names for these. So Durham in Philadelphia, who built cars for the mainline wealthy folk, they had an open car called a Tourister, not Tourister, but Tourister.
Like American Tourister.
Exactly,
Tourister,
that's
yes.
right. And Gary Cooper was one of the first people, I think, to have a Tourister. And then, like the car I drove at Rick Carroll's, Torpedo, and a wonderful name for a car that really looks like a torpedo, long with a pointed tail. Fabulous.
The town car that's out in the exhibit is called a Riviera town car,
Yes, yeah.
which sounded very elegant. It was all about the marketing and the cachet that they used to market this. Now, you said an interesting comment that made me think.
Only one?
Yeah, many. But in particular, you were just talking about, coach builders. My connection to Duesenberg is kind of odd in that I don't own one, first of all, but the city in which I live in Pennsylvania is Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Lancaster, Pennsylvania is about an hour and 15 minutes west of Philadelphia by train. Just north of Lancaster is the town of Reading, outside of which was Fleetwood, which was the coach builder of choice for Cadillac, amongst others, but predominantly there. Philadelphia, just outside of Philadelphia in Rosemont, was Durham, as Ken was mentioning, Durham Tourister, as the car was called. So here's Little Lancaster by comparison, and you've got Durham on the one side and Fleetwood, the two giants of coach building, and little town of Lancaster by comparison has a coach builder, Charles Shuddy. If you take a very close look out there, the green Duesenberg, when you walk in past Judge North's car in the center, we'll talk about that in a moment, the very first car is Augie Duesenberg's personal car, which was bodied by Charles Shuddy Body Company in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And I have, over the years, this is the book that I haven't written that Ken should be making me feel badly about, but they bodied 6 Duesenberg Model A's. What's this little town that had a coach builder, had 6 Duesenbergs bodied within that, one of which ends up being Augie Duesenberg's personal car. Pretty cool story.
And it is. So thinking about these bodies and your point about how valuable Duesenbergs were, many of them were rebodied. A new owner would want a different body built. So what adding to the confusion of 481 or two Duesenbergs, a number of them had new bodies fitted. They didn't change the chassis number necessarily, but people, even some of the big historians like Fred Rowe, weren't always sure, was that a car that had started from scratch that way, or was it was it an original car?
And along those lines, Duesenberg even addressed that by coming up with what was called the JN,
Yes.
which was in the mid-30s. The car was obviously a bit long in the tooth. It had been out for 6 years. How do we keep this car relevant, even though it's being built in very limited numbers? And they came out with the JN model, which was upgrades and really more of a streamlined kind of a body that was put on by coach builders.
Smaller wheels.
Right.
Bullet-shaped
Make it sit
headlights
lower and
and
things
so
like
forth.
that. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's interesting when you look at these because, as Bill said, a number of them really escaped the scrap drives because they were just so beautiful. People didn't want to destroy them in any way. But there were some specials along the way. One of the best Duesenberg mechanics for many years was a man named Jim Ho in Connecticut. And he built a couple of Duesenberg hot rods, lightweight chassis, Duesenberg engines. I don't know if any of those have survived today, but they were done. And he was the guy who you went to On the East Coast, if you had a problem with your Duesenberg, factory was long gone, dealers were sort of long gone. Some of the parts went to Oklahoma, but Jim Ho was the guy. And when I was growing up, he had one visit there, and it was like going to Duesenberg heaven. All these cars in semi repair and so forth. And a man who kind of looked at you the way Luigi Canetti did years later, like, what are you doing here? You don't have one of these cars. I don't need to talk to you.
Let's talk about some of the bodies that ended up on these cars. I can't run back through to get to it because it's in the loop of the pictures. But if you saw a silver four-door sedan Duesenberg, it's probably the most famous, really, if not, it's got to be up there.
The 20 grand.
It's called the 20 grand, and the car got its name because that's what the price was after they put everything together with the bodywork and the car itself. It was $20,000, and it was nicknamed that.
Yep.
And that has a unique name. It's an Arlington,
Yes.
which sounds shishi. You know, if you watch what was the Dallas, the Carringtons? My car is the Arlington. It sounds very nice and a very upscale, and it's all about the image with Duesenberg. He or she drives a Duesenberg and trying to get that kind of cachet put across to their client base.
Well, and that car in 1933 was part of an impromptu contest between Pierce Arrow, Duesenberg, Packard, and who's the fourth one?
Up here, listen.
Well, Cadillac, of course, thank you. And each of those four luxury car makers designed what they thought was the car of tomorrow. Packard called it the car of the dome. Duesenberg's Arlington, the 20 grand, that was their idea. Pierce Arrow did a radical design, and we're not here to talk about Pierce Arrow, but their Silver Arrow was probably the most spectacular of those cars.
And the Cadillac was a big coupe.
Cadillac was they called it aerodynamic, 2 words, coupe, and it had a fastback tail, and it was definitely cool.
I would say by today's standards, it was not particularly aerodynamic.
No,
but at that time, it really was pretty advanced.
Well, part of the reason was most of these cars were more aerodynamic going backward than going forward. They wanted to identify what the car was, the Duesenberg grille, the Packard grille, and so forth. So the aerodynamics kind of began at the windshield and went back. They weren't very aerodynamic at all.
We just passed a car that we should also talk about. It's here in the exhibit, which is Judge North's Duesenberg, the wooden body car that you saw to the front when you walked in the exhibit. And we both knew the judge rather well, and a little story and what you might want to talk about.
Well, he truly was a wonderful man, and the Roadster that, as you go into the gallery on the left side, that was a car that he had when he was a law student at Harvard Law in Boston. It was his daily driver, and he liked to say that he was the longest continuous owner of a Duesenberg. And interestingly, as Bill pointed out, Duesenberg engines are green, jokingly the color of money. But Judge North's car has a red engine. It had a red engine when he got it, and he never wanted to change it. He was a wonderful man, diminutive in height, but a giant, really, a fabulous person to speak with about the law, about politics, and about log canoe sailing, which he loved to do. A log canoe sailboat is inherently designed to capsize. And he, in a very brave way with friends, people on outriggers and so forth, could sail these things. And I miss him terribly. I got to know him as part of a Bugatti exhibition at the Academy Art Museum. We worked together on it, and he so wanted to come here, and Dwight was going to bring him in his plane. So we miss you, Judge.
I've known the judge for perhaps, 15, 20 years, going back maybe 20 years. I've been the master of ceremonies at the St. Michael's Concord Elegance in Maryland, which the judge founded. And he was a character. He called me William, which is like nails on a chalkboard. That was his thing, because he was a very proper man.
And deep voice.
And he had, William, how are you doing today? He would say, or something like that to me. And just a neat guy. And I was going to tell a story and it just escaped me. Isn't that terrible?
I'll tell one
Go
while you
ahead,
think
it'll
about it.
come to me, yeah.
So I was asked when we had our Bugatti exhibition with the judges' cars. His son David provided an engine and Bugatti artifacts. We had a Rembrandt Bugatti sculpture. It was really wonderful. And I was asked to give a little opening lecture to some of the senior museum folk. And I was late because I couldn't find the damn house. And the nav, and this has probably happened to you sometimes, it was not taking me to the right place. Finally, I called and they beamed me in, and they'd already had a couple of drinks, and my time had pretty much run out. But I had a lot to say, and I started to say it, and I heard a few people snickering, and I looked around, and there was Judge North with a boat hook. And I mean, you heard that expression of hook, hook, hook. Well, there he was with this hook, and I said, okay, Judge, I get it, and I wrapped things up, and that's what it was.
Now I remember
Now you
the
probably
story.
remember
Yeah,
the
I
story.
did. At St. Michael's, they would have a tour. And so there would always be, vintage cars on the tour. I don't collect cars. I jokingly say I live vicariously through all my wealthy friends. So David, his son, called me up, and he goes, hey, Dad wants to know, what car do you want to take on the tour? And I was like, it was silence. And I said, what? He goes, well, Dad wants to be sure you have a car to take on the tour. Would you be okay? They had a Stutz Super Bearcat. I think there are 6 of them total were made. Anyway, he goes, Dad wants to know if you'd like to take the Stutz. And I said, are you nuts? I said, that's like a $3 million car. Are you kidding me? He goes, no, Dad wants you to drive it. Hey, would you? I said, hell yeah, sign me up. And it was just so much fun. And the next year I took a one-off Bentley, and he was just a very generous guy. And one final little story about him. He was a very talented sculptor, and he did all the trophies for St. Michael's, which are beautiful. They're really, really cool trophies. But he also did this giant sailboat out of granite on the base, and then the sails were big hammered aluminum or something that was polished, and the thing was massive. And our good friends, the Caldwells, bought it at the auction at dinner. And I said, Judge, I want that boat, but I don't want that big boat. I don't have a house that can accommodate that giant boat. Will you make me one smaller, about less than half the size? But I want mine with a black granite base and hammered copper sails. And he said, oh, Bill, I'll do that for you, or whatever.
Pretty good
Okay.
invitation.
I said, great. So 3 years later, I still don't have the boat, and I reminded him of it. He said, oh, yes, I'm working on it. I said, well, let me know. Whatever you tell me it is, I'll write the check to you, to the Concours, whatever. I'm working on it, whatever. So I didn't think he was serious. So the next year, his son says, Mom and Dad want you to stop by the house. And so we did. So after we exchanged our pleasantries, he said, I have something for you. And out he came with the boat. Wow. And it was exactly what I had envisioned in my head. And I said, Judge, it's spectacular. That's exactly what I want. How much do I owe you? And he said, that's for you, Bill. For all you do for the Concours. I'm going to get emotional. But he is a special guy. So it was really cool. And I'm sorry he's not here with us. It was just a matter of weeks ago that he passed. But he almost made it to his 94th birthday.
Yep.
He was sharp as a tack. So there was hope for us all. So that's a good thing. Anyway, back to Duesenberg stuff. Do you have a favorite Duesenberg?
Yes, I do, and I think we may have a photo. It's the Walker LeGrand Josiah Lilly Coupe, a one-of-a-kind car that Jay Leno was able to buy. And people had thought about this car for years. It had, they thought it hadn't survived. And the quick funny story about it is that Jay with Randy Ema, probably the premier Duesenberg restorer. Oh, yeah, there it is. Jay likes to say it's the landlord's car, and as only he would. Well, when he called to negotiate a price for this thing, the owner said, "I'm really worried about capital gains, and I'll tell you what I'll do. I'm going to ship you the car. It needs everything. You'll have to start restoring it, but I'm not going to sell it to you yet until the capital gains tax rate comes down." So Jay got the car, went to Randy's. They started working on it, and Jay a couple of times said, I've got hundreds of thousands of dollars in this car. I don't own it. And sure enough, finally, I think the rate went from like 15 to 10%. And the man called and said, okay, I'm going to sell you the car. They worked out the price. And sadly, 2 weeks later, he had died. So I've driven with Jay in this car, and any Duesenberg attracts attention. This really attracts attention. And Jay's a somewhat bigger guy than I am, and it reminded us of Josiah Lilly because he didn't drive the car. He rode with his chauffeur. The car's fairly narrow, so the two of us squeezed together like the friends we are. It was an amazing feeling. And I just love the shape, the aerodynamics, and
It's one of one.
yes.
And all the A's and all the J's and SJs, they all have unique bodies. So even though you heard me say when we were in the opening about Murphy built 70 convertible coupes, they were each different. They weren't the same. It wasn't a car that was rolled out on a line with, stuff coming down on a hanger. On a hanger to be placed on the car. Somebody's there beating the panels of the car out of aluminum on a wooden buck. And it's a fascinating process to think that your car was so customized that it was made in such a fashion. And
Really?
as an example of that, Walker LeGrand, we're talking about the coach builders. I said every Duesenberg had a unique body. That was Duesenberg's in-house coach builder. Walker was the president of Duesenberg at the time, and he needed to come up with a name that was
Elegant. Yep.
and so they came up with LeGrand, which was purely fictitious. It had nothing to do, but it sounded good. The car that you see here, this has a body by Fernandez and Darren.
Oh, and if we hold that, I have a great story about that.
Oh, the black car? Go back.
Yep.
We can go back to that.
Can we go
the
to
car
the-
the car
the
that's
Rudolph
here
Bauer
in the
car.
center is Fernandez and Darren. Dutch Darren, you all know that name, I'm sure, if you're hanging around cars. Darren was, of course, the bon vivant, who was the Playboy-esque designer, designer to Hollywood stars, things like that. Fernandez was an Argentinian banker. He was the money, and he cut off Darren, basically, and said, stop. You've got to stop spending money like it's water. So the two of them, it was a very short-lived partnership, to say the least.
But they produced some really beautiful cars.
Some of the most elegant Duesenbergs I think that there are.
So
back
quick,
to the
quick
black
story
car.
about this. So this is the Rudolph Bauer car, and Rudolph Bauer was a German Jewish artist. He owned 3 Duesenbergs, and this car was the last. It's kind of called a 1937/1940. It's the last Duesenberg to be bodied. Bauer originally wanted it to be done by Erdmann and Rossi in Berlin, but 1938-39 wasn't a good idea to be Jewish in Germany. So the car was bodied by Rolson in New York City. So Bob Peterson, who I worked for at the Peterson Museum, loved to look at a catalog, and oftentimes he'd say, let's get the car on the cover. So this was a Christie's catalog cover, and he said, find out what we should pay for this car, and he said, I think it would be wonderful. What I haven't said is that it is totally original. It was still on its Vogue white wall tires with a brocade maroon interior. I mean, really pretty amazing car. So when Bauer died, it came up for sale along with the other 2, along with a supercharger, a real supercharger, not a Marshall Merck's copy. So Pete said, you need to find out what it should cost. And I asked Randy Ema, and Randy said, I think it's $850. And I said that to Pete, and Pete said, okay, you got $850 plus the commission, and I'm going on a hunting trip. This was back in the era where telephones looked like walkie-talkies and they were in a satchel, and it really wasn't possible to call him. And I thought, well, $850, that's going to be enough. And I called Miles Morris at Christie's and said, I want to bid on this car. And Miles gave me the time to call him. There really is, telephone bids are real. And in this instance, I knew what the right time was, and I could hear the bidding in the background, and this lot was coming up. And I said, Miles, what did the supercharger go for? He said, take a guess. I said, I don't know, 35,000, 50,000? He said, more. Well, we didn't want to keep playing that game, but it was over $200,000. I immediately thought, this is the last Duesenberg. It's a supercharged car. I don't have enough money, and I can't call Pete. So the bidding started, 300, 400, 500, 600, kind of stalled a little bit. Miles said, Ken, are you in? Are you in? I said, you know me, Miles, I like to wait till the end. It went 7, 8, 9. It went to $1.25 million. And I thought, how am I going to explain this to Peterson? And Miles said, you want to bid? And I said, no, I really can't. That's not my budget. Sunday night, I called Pete, or he called. Did we get it? And I said, no, we didn't. He said, why not? I said, it sold for $1.25 million. And we had $850. And he said, why didn't you bid? And I said, because it's not my money. And he said, good. So
So you did the right thing.
I'd done the right thing, but we didn't get the car. So just as a quick postscript, the car went at that time to Lee Harrington. And Lee had also bought the supercharger, and he basically said to his guy, just get the supercharger. And Lee told me afterward, I was in the swimming pool, and when they told me that I'd paid over $200,000 for the supercharger, I contemplated getting under the water and staying there.
Why do you think, here we are almost 100 years later, why is it that we still have such a fascination with this automobile, and why, despite the softening in the market for vintage cars of this era, why do Duesenbergs still ring the cash register?
Rarity, the technical specification, the people who owned these cars, if you're lucky enough to get one that was owned by Mr. or Ms. So-and-so, the sheer power of these cars, the visible impact, I think they tick every box, and they still do. We're at the point now in the car hobby where cars like this are almost like the old masters. People, younger collectors who have the means are buying some of these cars. They're like the museums and uber wealthy people who buy Rembrandts and Vermeers and so forth. They weren't there to remember Rembrandt, but they know great quality when they see it, and that's the case for the Duesenberg.
We need to move on to our question and answer period, but I was thinking something we could probably end on. Another thing that was kind of very odd for Duesenberg is the fact that they advertised he or she drives a Duesenberg. I mean, first of all, think about the gal who's driving a 7,000-pound car without power steering. I mean, I'm thinking about I've driven a Duesenberg a very short distance, and you, pardon my sexism here, you have to manhandle the steering wheel. I mean, it's just powerful. It's a very, very serious chunk of machinery. But they actively marketed the cars to women, and women bought them. There were many, many, many famous women owners.
Ethel Mars comes to mind
Mars
right
is
away.
like Mars Candy, right?
Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There were a lot. So that's an interesting thing for a 30s car that they promoted to women.
I totally agree, and as somebody who started in the advertising business, what I thought was a very bold thing about those ads, they didn't show the car.
Right.
It's just a wealthy guy in his library, an elegant woman giving instructions to the gardener. It took the same kind of boldness and bravado that is associated with Duesenberg to this day.
And it hasn't changed.
Nope.
To this day. It's
Not a
rather
bit.
amazing.
Not a bit.
Thank you, Ken. That was great.
Thank you.
We would like to open it up to everybody here. If anybody has any questions, we'll attempt to answer them. And Bruce and Tom both have microphones here. So.
And remember, Bill's having trouble walking, and I have trouble hearing.
Yeah, I'm not running up
so
the steps.
We're going to need to make sure we hear what the question is.
Were the transmissions synchronized?
Not in.
No, I don't believe
not
in
in
first, but perhaps in second
I think
and
in
third.
second, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's only a 3-speed with a big torquey motor, because the idea was you got it to third as quickly as you could and you didn't shift. But if you needed to go 88 miles an hour, or in the case of the SJ, over 100 in second, you could do that.
Think about that too at the time. I mean, that was back to the comment I made about otherworldly. You have a car in 1929 that was able to do that, reach 88 miles an hour in second gear. That's just crazy to think of the power and the performance, especially now today when we have 1,000 horsepower Corvettes and you can go into the dealer and buy one and write a check and come home with it. But this is a very, very different thing. Yes, Bruce, I'm sorry.
So this is my 16-year-old self asking the question, when you drove the Duesenberg, how fast did you get it going to?
My case was around the parking lot. I don't think they trusted me beyond that. So Ken,
75, which I thought was, if I got stopped again by Officer Joyce, she knew who I was, but the road, it kind of didn't really permit where Rick lived. I'd love to have gone faster, and the car certainly was capable of doing it.
Dwight, how fast did you ever take a Duesenberg?
Probably 90.
Okay. Did you feel comfortable and secure in the car at 90 miles?
Absolutely.
Yeah, there you go. Right. That's another thing. Try and go 50 miles an hour in a Model A. You know, it's not the smoothest ride. So this is that comparison of $450 versus $20,000. So.
Bill, we've got one right here.
Oh, okay.
You spoke earlier, it was 482 chassis? Is that-
Ish.
And
I think the numbers argued it's 480 something, whether
Yes,
it's 481 or
So
482.
what is the current number of survivors? How many are out there? What?
Randy
in the
Eman told me
200s,
that
isn't
once, and it's over 300.
Is it more? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a
slightly
fairly
over
large
300.
number of them have survived.
Yep.
Same is true like a Rolls-Royce. In early Rolls-Royce Silver Ghosts that were produced between 1908 and 1925, there's a remarkable number of them that still exist, and people take them on world tours and drive them all over the place. It was a car that was part of the family, and I think that's true with this car. So people tried to save them. They were obviously a very expensive purchase when they were new, so they hung around.
My memory is saying 280 something is what Randy
I don't know that
Randy
number.
said, and of course Randy has all the paperwork and many of the patterns and blueprints from the factory. So he probably
He's Mr. Duesenberg.
Yes, truly.
My question isn't about about Duesenberg so much, but the industry in general. As you pointed out, virtually all the independent luxury car makers disappeared during the 30s, with one exception, that was Packard. What did Packard do that allowed it to survive another 20 years?
Which one of us wants to tackle that?
I'll happily start.
Oh, please. And I'll chime in.
Packard realized that they needed to offer a less expensive car, hopefully with the same cachet that Packard had. And they did a series of cars, and some people would argue, and Bill can speak to this better than I, I'm sure, that their lower price cars really ruined the Packard
diluted the
reputation.
brand.
But remember that when World War II started, Packard was commissioned, among other things, to build the Rolls-Royce Merlin V12, the engine that powered the Mustang, and they did it much better than the Brits. I have to say they had precision manufacturing, and the engines had more horsepower. They also built the engines for the PT boats, three 12-cylinder engines in a boat. So those contracts helped Packard make it through the end of World War II and into the early 50s before ultimately they couldn't afford to build as cool a car as a Cadillac.
Yes, and they didn't have the financial clout of GM behind them, which obviously Cadillac did. Cadillac also kind of paved the way for Packard in 1929 when they introduced the LaSalle, which was all the rage at GM to have a companion car. Oldsmobile had Viking, Buick had Marquette, Cadillac had LaSalle, and Oakland had Pontiac. Pontiac later usurped Oakland as, the companion car became the production car. But Cadillac kind of paved the way and started that. But really, the LaSalle was not an inexpensive car.
No.
It was a lower price car by comparison to a Cadillac, but was not inexpensive. Packard determines after, being crushed by Cadillac in the 40s, literally that we need to, or really the 30s, it was when the change started to take place. So they introduced a car called the 120, which was a smaller version of the Packard. It was a 120-inch wheelbase, 120 horsepower, and it was kind of a marketing thing. Well, what happened was now they're competing with Oldsmobile and Mercury and cars that were not typically in a Packard price class, but it now became 90+% of Packard production. So the company was selling inexpensive cars, there was no margin on them, and it essentially the cash disappeared from the company.
I would
That's
add
the
that
best
these
way to-
cars looked like Packards.
Oh, they were beautiful. And then they diluted it further with a
then-
110,
right.
which was a 6-cylinder version of the car. And that, people oftentimes today say, is what put the end to those cars. Yes.
All right, we've got one over here.
Bill and Ken, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge.
Sure.
I obviously wasn't around when these cars were built, so I was curious to find out. Another car that I looked into in my childhood was Auburn and Cord, and the boat tail in particular. Friend had one that I got a chance to drive when I was just a teenager, and it was, like you say, very difficult to steer, very heavy. Could you lay out the historic part and the timeline, Auburn, Cord, because I see one of your slides up there that has the museum in northern Indiana. I've visited there as well, which is quite a treasure to go see. Where do they fall in line with the Duesenberg?
Do you want to start that?
Oh, gee, thanks. Auburn was really, at the turn of the century, a builder in Indiana. They built very inexpensive, very nerdy kind of cars, for lack of a better choice of words. I mean, they're very pedestrian, very simple, not complex. I mean, they're dealing with a farm audience in rural Indiana. And along comes Cord, who was actually working at the Moon Automobile Company in St. Louis, Missouri. He rose to the position of general manager, made a lot of money, came back and bought Auburn. And Auburn is sitting with parking lots full of cars that are unsold. So one by one, the story is that he brought them back to the factory and chromed them up, put two-tone paint jobs on them with wild colors and all this stuff, and sold out Auburn's inventory. So then he hires the designer,
Al Lehman.
Al Lehman, who designs the Speedster as the, quote, halo car, the Corvette of the Auburn lineup. It's to get people in the showroom, get them excited. Auburn makes a couple bucks, makes a profit. He decides, okay, now I'm going to introduce my companion car, which is a Cord, which is front-wheel drive, something that nobody's produced in the U.S., with the front wheels driving the car rather than the back wheels pushing the car. And he built that 2930-31.
Long hood, low silhouette.
sexy
Coach
car.
builders love them.
Yes, and they sat 8 inches lower than a typical car because unlike now where we have a hump in the middle of the car where the driveline goes to the back of the car, well, the Cord did not have that driveline. And cars like this, there's no hump going back through the floor. The car sits on top of the driveline. So this was a car that was 8 inches shorter, and it was revolutionary in terms of its design.
Lower.
Simultaneous to that, he buys Duesenberg, tells Augie and Fred Duesenberg, build me the best car, cost be damned, and that's my side of the story.
Well,
so can you make
no,
that
just
better?
to add to that, the L29, which was the first Cord front-wheel drive car, at the same time in St. Louis was a company called Ruxton, and they
Right, I
tried to
forgot
do
that
pretty
part.
much the same thing. The cars came out within weeks of one another.
Which were manufactured in the Moon plant.
And they were not successful. But Cord liked the idea, and he liked the idea of having a car with his name. So the 810s and 812s, which came along in 1935, were an even bolder front-wheel drive car. Now they had Gordon Burig, and he designed what they call the coffin nose Cord. It was an engineering triumph, front drive, Lycoming V8 engine, ultimately supercharged, very, very stylish, and with a pre-selector gearbox, a forerunner to an automatic transmission. You used your fingertip to shift this little button on the wheel, and when you wanted the gear, you stepped on the clutch.
Hidden headlights?
And away, hidden headlights indeed. So, but again, not a financial success given that the depression was lingering on and times were really, really bad. So, but the court lasted about the same as Duesenberg, 1937,
Yep.
and then
And
they
Auburn
were,
too.
Yeah, and they were gone.
Okay, guys.
Got another one over here.
Did that answer your question, by the way? Okay, all right.
Ken, first of all, again and again, we owe you a debt of gratitude for your involvement in the Savoy, and we're thrilled to adopt you and have you adopt us. So welcome again for the 100th time.
Thank
Bill,
you.
my question is not a Duesenberg question. My question is a Savoy and Cartersville question. I like to ask this question. Before you ever heard of us, and then all of a sudden you heard of Savoy and you don't know much about us or anything, you know nothing about Cartersville, what was your preconceived notion of our town and our museum before you got there? And then what was your first impressions when you got there? But before you answer, let me also say, Dr. Google said there's 378 remaining Duesenbergs for whatever that's worth.
Very good.
So,
That's actually a question I can answer because I was at Chattanooga to MC the Concours in Chattanooga, and Saturday rolls around, and Bruce says to me, "Would you want to tour the museum?" I said, "Yeah, that'd be cool. I'd love to." I said, "But 2 friends of mine, do you mind if I bring them along?" No. So the three of us and Bruce hop in Bruce's car and drive an hour and 15 minutes down here. So I had 0 preconceptions because I had no idea what it was coming to. I got here, and Bruce will tell you this is true. Because I joke that I make up what I say as I go along. Whatever I'm thinking, it just comes to my mind. I said to Bruce, I'm like sick. I mean, this place is beautiful. And I sit on the board, my term is up, but I sat on the board of the AACA Museum in Hershey for 15 years. And I think we have a pretty special place in Hershey. And I said to Bruce, I want to go back and burn the building down. I said, I mean, we have a neat place, but this place is wow. So there's your answer. And that's not, is that true?
Oh, yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I just, toward the Depression, my understanding is that Duesenberg actually built a great number of chassis before the market collapsed.
Also true.
And that they spent most of their time trying to sell those chassis. That's where the SSJ came from, the JNs, all those cars. So they actually had excess inventory for most of the really important years that those cars were built. Is that true?
Very true.
Yeah, the
That is
idea
correct.
was 500, originally they were going to build 500 chassis and cars. And they did everything, including dealers did everything to body those things, try to sell them at the end.
Coming back to the embarrassment of riches, you know, you had the financial wherewithal to buy this, and then it was like, maybe that's like a little over the top. I shouldn't show my wealth. So you had to be a unique individual to say, I want that, and I'm going to drive around in it. Yeah. I saw somebody with...
We've got time for one
there
more.
you go.
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I mean, the Duesenberg brothers were very innovative, and besides the hydraulic brakes and the superchargers, is there anything else that was innovative?
They were the first car in the U.S. with an inline 8-cylinder engine.
Okay. And
The engine was largely aluminum. It was a lightweight car in that regard, which was later Marmon's really. And that was, Marmon was another Indianapolis racing company.
16 cylinders, all aluminum.
Yeah, exactly. So
great.
similar thought processes going on there.
You could adjust the brake modulation with a lever on the dash in a Duesenberg.
Oh, okay.
For wet conditions or dry conditions and so forth.
and could they have patented any of that?
They may
I
very
think
well have. I
yeah,
don't know
they
that.
may. Yeah, I don't know either. Generally, if
We
somebody had
Google that?
a good idea in that era, it was patented because they were also worried about competition.
People stealing things. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Exactly. Yeah.
When you think about it, perhaps the biggest deal was it was the most elegant, most expensive, most exclusive car of its era. And I mean, I just think it's fun to look at the who's who of people who own these cars. I mean, Jimmy Walker, the flamboyant mayor of New York, he had one, and Gary Cooper. Clark Gable had a roadster that Carol Lombard gave to him. That was a gift from her. Gable did not own the short chassis car. Cooper did, but they gave loaned these cars to Hollywood luminaries because they'd show up in movie tone news and so forth, and they'd get extra publicity.
Yeah, so before we end the evening, I want to take the opportunity to commandeer a little bit and do something special. For those of you that don't know, just bear with me for a couple of minutes while we talk a little bit about something that is going to happen here. My name is Tom Schnall, Director of Development here at Savoy, and well, he could also be turning my voice down too. You know how I am. But we want to take the opportunity to do something that is past due, in all honesty. It's hard to believe that we are nearing our 4th anniversary. We opened this museum on December the 7th, December the 8th, 2021. And for some of us, it goes well beyond that. 2026 is going to mark 8 years for some of us. It's been a part of this project. And we started reminiscing and looking back at milestones and things that we wanted to accommodate or accomplish, and we know that there's a lot of things that go into being where we are. And one thing that we have failed to do is recognize someone that has helped us get to the point and make Savoy what it is, and that's our friend Ken Gross. You all know that Ken comes regularly. He's a part of our programs. Ken has been a guest curator. But let me tell you a little story about how we got to know Ken in that sense. Early on, Frank Bergman was the designer of this museum. He was the visionary designer. He designed Booth Western Art Museum. He designed Telescience Museum. He left his mark on other projects, not only in this community, but across the country and across the globe. And so when it was decided that Georgia Museums was going to build another museum, Frank was again brought back to be a part of that. And so Frank made it his own personal mission to go out and learn everything he could about automotive museums. He went to museums all over America. He went to museums all over Europe. He went to international car shows, domestic car shows. He went to Concours events. He read book after book after book. We would hear about this on a daily basis of what he's learning, what he's envisioning, what he's seeing. And in doing so, he learned a lot about Ken. Frank got to a point where he fought valiantly to say, we need to get Ken Gross involved in this project. And this was during the design stages and the idea stages and things like that. And he fought and fought and fought. Now, in hindsight, I've got to give credit where credit's due, and that goes back to our founder, to where our founder would always say, no, that's not necessary. And in reality, the concept was simple. You design. He was looking at Frank, and he would say, you design the booth. You design Tellus, you've done all these works, you need to make Savoy yours, and you need to do so without other opinions and professional advice and things like that. And I think it's safe to say that looking back at it, I've even heard Ken say this. This is a place that's so much more than you have ever thought it could have been. And I think that's a testament to what Frank's vision was. Now, in doing so, unfortunately, we lost Frank in January of 2021. 10, 11 months before we opened this museum. Now, at that point, the vision, the design was there. It was implementation at that point. And that opened the door and the opportunity to have Ken come get to know who Savoy would be. And so we invited Ken down. Ken spent some time with us. He visited the other museums. And it was strategic in why we were doing this. The mindset was, here we are brand new to the car culture world, but we're not new to the museum world. We have the experience of what happened at the booth and what happened at Tellus and the Bartow History Museum. But in the car world, we were the new kids on the block. And how are we going to go convince somebody to, let us borrow your 33 Pierce Arrow Silver Arrow or your 1948 Tucker? We didn't have those connections. Ken did. Ken had the experience. He had the connections. He had the Rolodex. For those that don't remember what that is, it's like the contact list in your phone. He had that. And so it was that element of, Ken, this is who we are and this is our vision and who we want to be. And Ken said, I want to be a part of this. And so from day one, in that aspect, he has been a part of the success of the museum. And it is long overdue that we haven't thanked you properly in that sense. On behalf of our staff, on behalf of our members, our volunteers, our car culture community, thank you for helping make Savoy what it has become in that sense. I know Bruce probably has something he would like to say as well. Bruce?
Right, the mic does work. So, yes, I'd like to thank Ken also. So many of you may not know, I didn't come from a museum background, and so, curation was new to me. And so Ken has been doing his best to teach me how to do that, and I'd like to thank him for all that. Without your help, learning and contacts, it wouldn't have been possible. I'd like to thank you very much from the bottom of my heart, and I really think we really became good friends, and I really appreciate it. So thank you, Ken.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Well, and last but obviously not least, we want to give the opportunity for McCrae Adair, our executive director, to share a little bit with Ken as well.
So I'm going to try to get through this without getting us losing or crying or anything like that. Ken has not only become our friend, but he and Trish, his lovely wife's with us tonight. They are family here. And as Tom alluded to, Ken was in some pretty rough meetings that we sat in on at the beginning, and I thought we were going to lose him, but he hung in there with us. So I am very appreciative because you have opened the doors. We wouldn't have the Kofer car or any of the other cars that Mr. Schaubox, that we have been able to bring to Savoy and to this community. You've put us on the map. You've helped spread the word. And I can only see things going much further with your help. So I thank you. But on behalf of myself and our founder and the team, I'm going to give you a badge. You have your own badge now. But besides that, Blake, if you'll hit it, we've named a gallery after you.
Thank you, McCrae. That's really very, very kind.
Gallery A at Savoy Automobile Museum will forever be known as the Ken Gross Gallery.
So you'll see it when you go out.
Thank you, Bruce. I'm not usually speechless, but I will say thank you to everyone. This has been an endearing and special project. We, from the top down and let's say the bottom up, everyone here has been so helpful, and we all share the same goal. We really want this museum to be the best it can possibly be. McCrae and I had an interesting conversation this afternoon about next steps and places we can go, and all I'm going to say in my best Southern way is you ain't seen nothing yet. So thank you all.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's very nice.
Very
And a
cool.
badge.
Okay, so if you guys, we're going to go outside. We're going to take some pictures with Ken in front of it, so you can see the sign outside when you leave, or you can come up here and take pictures with the cars. But we're going to go out there and take a few pictures with Ken.
I'm not even sure where it started, but he was profoundly knowledgeable. I've always enjoyed your commentary at events, and very pleased you could be here tonight.
Well, thanks, Ken. I'm grateful to be here, especially on the night that you're being honored. It means a lot to me. You're well deserved. Thank you. Thank you all.